You can judge me if you want to. I've judged myself more times than I can count. And trust me, what I did. It sounds wrong. I know that. But you don't just wake up one day and decide to throw a grenade into your life. It doesn't happen like that. It starts quietly, softly, like a slow leak you don't notice until the water's at your ankles. Behind every mistake, there's a reason. And behind that reason is a story. And this is mine. It started the day Caleb walked into my life. He was just supposed to fix a pipe under my kitchen sink. That's all. Nothing more than a favor. He worked with my husband, for God's sake. But from the moment he stepped inside my house, something shifted. I remember the sound of my kitchen chair creaking when I sat down across from him. I was nervous. I don't even know why. I poured myself a little wine, middle of the day, which I never did, and it felt illicit. Wrong. Exciting. He was 10 years younger than me. Dark hair, quiet confidence, eyes that looked at you like you were the only thing in the room. And he listened. Not just nodded along, listened. He heard me. And when I laughed, really laughed, it felt like something in me had been asleep for years and was just now waking up. I was married. I had a son. I had a life people envied. Crisp white curtains, organized cabinets, dinners on the table by 6. I had it all. But deep down, God, I was starving. Not for food. Not for attention. Not even for sex. I was starving for life. For someone to see me again. To see past the titles, wife, mother, dependable. And remembered that I was a woman. With skin that still burned. With dreams I'd packed away like winter clothes. I never planned to cross a line. I didn't think I had it in me. But the way Caleb looked at me from across the kitchen table, like I wasn't invisible, like I mattered. It stirred something in me that I hadn't felt since. God, I don't even remember when. And that's how it starts, isn't it? Not with a kiss. Not with a touch. But with a look. A smile held just a second too long. I still remember how my fingers curled around the stem of that wine glass. How my voice shook just slightly when I asked him a stupid question. Something like, "Do you write poetry?" Because he had that kind of soul. You could feel it in the silence. That day? That first quiet afternoon? That's when the match was struck. We just didn't know yet that everything would catch fire. I wasn't supposed to feel anything that day. I remember I was wearing this old gray sweatshirt, the one with a little bleach stain near the hem, and my hair was up in a bun, not the cute, messy kind, just the I don't have time to care kind. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and reheated soup. It was just another Tuesday. Another day I was sleepwalking through. I was 38. Wife. Mother. Ex-copywriter turned full-time homemaker. I used to be someone who wrote words that made people feel things, and now I barely felt anything at all. Most days I moved through the house like a ghost. Laundry. Dishes. Grocery lists. My husband, Dave, he was always busy. Meetings. Deadlines. Coming home late and falling asleep in front of the TV with a beer on his chest. We were polite. Functional. Like coworkers who shared a mortgage. So when Dave told me his junior from work was swinging by to help with the sink, I didn't think twice. I just said, sure. I didn't even put on mascara. And then, there he was. Caleb. 27. All scruffy charm and quiet eyes. Wearing a dark green shirt with rolled sleeves and hands that looked like they belonged to someone who worked with them. Not like Dave's soft, clean, detached. He smiled when he walked in, and I swear to God, it lingered. Just long enough for me to notice. Just long enough for something inside me to flicker. I offered him iced tea. He took it, said thank you, and looked me dead in the eye when he did. Not in a creepy way. Not in a flirtatious way. Just present. I don't remember the exact words we exchanged at first. Mostly polite things. Small talk. But I remember the way he moved, deliberate, calm. I remember the sound of his laugh. It came from somewhere real. Not performative like the ones at dinner parties. While he was under the sink, I was pretending to read a book. Only I wasn't reading at all. I was watching the way his forearms flexed when he twisted the wrench, and I hated myself for it, because it had been so long since I'd even noticed another man like that. It felt stupid and dangerous and alive. When he finished, I handed him a dish towel and offered him a seat at the kitchen table. "Stay for a cup of tea?" I asked, already pouring without waiting for an answer. It felt innocent. I needed it to feel innocent, because I already knew it wasn't. He sat across from me. Same chair where Dave usually did, only somehow it felt different. The air felt charged, but quiet. We talked about nothing at first. Then he saw the books on my shelf. He tilted his head and said, "You read poetry?" I laughed and said, "Used to. Before the kid, the bills, the dinner rush." And then he said something I didn't expect. He said, "I write poetry. Sometimes." And I just looked at him. This guy, with calloused hands and engine grease on his jeans, wrote poetry? That cracked something open in me. I asked him what kind. He said, "The kind you write when you don't know who else to tell the truth to." And then he smiled, small, private, like he'd just confessed something he hadn't meant to say out loud. I laughed again, not the fake, polite kind, but a real laugh. And it startled me, because I hadn't heard that sound come out of my own mouth in months, maybe years. He noticed. I saw it in his eyes. And he didn't say anything. He just looked at me like he got it. Like he understood something about me without me having to explain it. It should have ended there. A thank you. A goodbye. He should have stood up, walked to the door, and I should have gone back to my dishes and my safe, quiet life. But something shifted. Something in the air. It wasn't what he said. It was what he didn't. It was the space between us, the kind that feels like it's pulling you forward. He wiped his hands with the towel, stood up slowly, and said, "You're not what I expected." I didn't ask what he meant. I didn't want to ruin it by making it real. I just said, "Neither are you." And then, silence. Not awkward. Not uncomfortable. Just thick with something neither of us could name yet. When he left, I stood at the door a full minute after it closed, holding my breath, touching the place on my arm where his hand had grazed it when he passed. It was nothing. It was everything. And in that moment, standing barefoot in my kitchen with a cold cup of tea in my hand, I felt more alive than I had in years. It started with little things. Innocent things. Or at least, that's what I told myself. Caleb began stopping by more often. Always with some reason. A forgotten tool. A loose cupboard hinge. One time he said he left a pair of gloves in the garage. They weren't his. But I didn't question it. Because somewhere in me, I wanted him to come back. Each visit felt casual on the surface. Friendly. Helpful. But under it, there was this hum. Low and quiet, like the silence before a storm. It wasn't flirtation, not overtly. It was awareness. The way I knew when he was in the room before he said a word. The way he noticed things no one else did. He remembered I liked jasmine tea. Not the regular kind, the one with the dried orange peel I only found at this tiny market 2 towns over. He brought me a box one day. Said he saw it and thought of me. And I just stared at it for a moment too long, like it was a love letter. He remembered the song I was humming once, a forgotten indie tune from college. Sang the first line back to me the next time he came over. I laughed, brushed it off, but my stomach fluttered. We'd talk at the kitchen table when Dave was still at work. Nothing scandalous. Nothing dangerous. Books. Music. Childhood memories. But it was the way he asked things, the way he listened. One afternoon, he asked me, "What made you stop writing?" And I froze. Because no one had asked me that. Not in years. Not even Dave. I mumbled something about motherhood, time, priorities. And Caleb just nodded, slow, like he didn't believe me. Then he asked, "Do you miss it?" And that question stayed with me long after he left. I told myself it was nothing. He was being kind. I was being dramatic. I was married. But I started to notice myself doing things I hadn't in a long time. Wearing perfume in the mornings. Brushing my hair out before he arrived, just in case. Changing my top if it looked too plain. Not consciously, I told myself. Just instinct. The tension built like slow heat. Fingers brushing when we passed things, a spoon, a mug, the edge of a dish towel. His eyes lingering half a second too long. Mine dropping, then rising again. One day, I was stirring soup, and he was behind me, too close. I felt the warmth of him before he spoke. He reached past me for something, and his hand grazed the small of my back. I jumped. He apologized, barely a whisper, but didn't move right away. Neither did I. And that night, when I climbed into bed next to my husband, all I could think about was the way Caleb's breath had felt on my neck. And I hated myself for it. But I also clung to it. I tried to bury it. I told myself I was being foolish. That I was just lonely. That any attention would feel like affection when you've been starving for so long. But then he brought me something. It was a small, worn leather journal. Vintage. Soft and creased like it had lived a life. He handed it to me and said, "You should write again." That's all he said. Not a compliment. Not a challenge. Just, "You should write again." I held it like it was fragile. Like it might dissolve in my hands. It had been so long since someone had seen that part of me. The woman who wasn't just a mother or a wife, or someone who filled the fridge and folded laundry, but someone who used to dream in sentences and metaphors. I didn't cry. Not in front of him. But when he left, I sat in the living room with that journal in my lap. And cried like I had lost something. Or maybe found it again. From that day on, it wasn't just tension. It was invitation. And even though nothing had happened, not really, a line had been drawn. And we were both standing right at the edge. It was a Friday. Late afternoon. The sky had been bruising all day, that deep, silvery gray that hangs like a promise. Dave was out of town. A quarterly meeting. Something about team building. He texted that morning, "Don't wait up." I didn't respond right away. Didn't know what to say. Didn't know what I was waiting for. The house was quiet. My son was at a sleepover. Just me and the rain beginning to tap at the windows. I lit a candle. Not for mood. Just for company. Then, a knock at the back door. I knew who it was before I even stood up. I opened it, and there he stood. Caleb. Damp hair. Hands shoved in his jacket pockets. Holding something in his fist. "Hey," he said. "I forgot to give this back last time." The wrench. He held it out like a peace offering. Like an excuse. Like a loaded question. I took it. Thanked him. I should have closed the door. But instead, I said, "You want to come in for a minute? It's pouring out there." Just a minute. 1 minute. He stepped inside. The door clicked shut behind him. And just like that, the air changed. I poured 2 glasses of wine. Red. Cheap. But warm. He stood at the kitchen doorway, dripping rain on the mat, his eyes scanning the room like it was new. Even though it wasn't. I turned on the small speaker. Music. Something low and moody. A piano. A voice like velvet. We didn't talk much at first. Just sipped. Listened. The kind of silence that feels full. Then, without thinking, or maybe thinking too much, I pulled out the journal. The one he gave me. I flipped to a page I'd scribbled on the night before. My voice shook a little as I started to read. The words weren't polished. They weren't even good. But they were mine. A short piece. About a woman standing in the middle of her own life. Surrounded by everything she thought she wanted. And yet feeling like she couldn't breathe. When I looked up, he was watching me. Not just listening. Watching. Like every word I said mattered. Like I mattered. And then, he said it. "You don't have to pretend anymore, Lila." Just like that. Soft. No agenda. No seduction in his voice. But it hit me like thunder. I froze. My throat thick. Because suddenly, every mask I'd been wearing, every role I'd been playing, slipped just a little. Pretend. He saw it. All of it. There was this stretch of silence between us, where everything we hadn't said started to say itself. He leaned forward. Not a kiss. Just closeness. His knee brushed mine under the table. His breath was warm and wine-sweet. His eyes didn't blink. And for a split second, I let myself wonder. What if? What if I leaned too? What if I closed that inch? What if I stopped being good? But instead, I stood. Too fast. The chair creaked behind me. I walked to the kitchen counter. Gripped it like it might anchor me. My heart was pounding. Not like fear. Like something trying to break out. He didn't follow. He just sat there, watching me. His expression unreadable. I turned my back to him. Stared at the raindrops racing each other down the windowpane. Tried to pretend my hands weren't shaking. I should go, he said. I didn't answer. Didn't trust my voice. Behind me, the quiet sound of his chair scraping. Then footsteps. Then the soft click of the door opening. He paused. Long enough that I felt him hesitate. Long enough that I almost turned around. But I didn't. The door closed behind him. And then, he was gone. Into the storm. I stayed there. Fingers white-knuckled on the counter's edge. Breathing hard. Not because of what happened. But because of what almost did. Desire and guilt. Tangled. Indistinguishable. Buzzing under my skin like static. I stood there until the candle burned out. Until the music stopped. Until I realized. I wasn't trembling from the rain. I was trembling from him. A week passed. And then, my birthday came. It was a Thursday. Quiet. Uneventful. The kind of day that slips by without making a sound. Dave forgot. Not completely, I mean, he sent a text around noon. Just 2 words. Happy birthday. No call. No dinner plans. No flowers. He didn't even ask how my day was going. I told myself it didn't matter. That we were busy. That he had deadlines. That maybe birthdays didn't mean as much once you hit 38. But I lied to myself. Because it did matter. It mattered so much that I didn't even realize how tightly I was holding it in until the knock came at the door. It was late afternoon. The sky was starting to darken, the way it does in early spring, that soft fading blue like old denim. And when I opened the door, it was Caleb. He didn't say anything at first. He just smiled, that small, thoughtful kind of smile, and held out a wrapped package. Brown paper. Twine. A sprig of lavender tucked under the knot. I blinked. You remembered. He shrugged, like it was nothing. But his eyes, they knew it wasn't. Inside was a book of poetry. Rainer Maria Rilke. Soft pages. The kind that feel like secrets when you flip them. I thought of you, he said, when I read the one about the quiet ache we carry. I swallowed. Because that line felt like it was written on my chest. The weather turned that evening. Power lines down the street snapped from wind. The lights flickered, then went out. Just like that. So we lit candles. I had 3 on the table already, melted into old wine bottles from past dinner parties that had meant more than this birthday ever would. The house was dim, the kind of warm shadowy glow that makes everything feel suspended. I don't even remember what we talked about. Something small. Books. Old movies. How much we both hated goodbyes. And then, somewhere in the middle of a silence that didn't feel empty, my hand. It just moved. I didn't plan it. I didn't think. I reached across the table, and my fingers found his. I expected him to pull away. Expected guilt to slap me in the face. Expected thunder to crash or a conscience to scream. But none of that happened. Because the moment our hands touched, everything else went still. We just looked at each other. And I didn't let go. Not this time. He leaned in first. Not rushed. Not aggressive. Just with intention. Like he'd been holding his breath for weeks and finally let it out in my direction. And when his lips met mine, everything inside me shattered and reassembled at the same time. It wasn't wild. It wasn't hurried. It was slow and deep and full of every unsaid thing we'd been carrying between us. When I pulled back, barely, I whispered it. This is wrong. But I didn't move. I didn't run. I didn't fix it. Because it also felt so right. In a way nothing had in years. He just looked at me, and I could see it. The fear, the wanting, the restraint burning behind his eyes. He could have taken more. He didn't. We didn't sleep together that night. There was no rush. Because what we crossed in that moment wasn't skin, it was soul. He left after midnight. I watched him walk back to his truck through the candlelit window. Barefoot, I stood there long after the taillights disappeared. The poetry book still open on the kitchen table. My mouth still tingling from the taste of him. And from that night on, something in me was different. The next few weeks blurred. We didn't say it out loud, what was happening. We just lived in the spaces between the words. A look when no one else was watching. His thumb brushing mine when he handed me a pen. Text messages that said nothing and everything. The rain's back. I heard a song that made me think of you. I almost knocked today, but I knew I shouldn't. Every time we were together, it felt right. Like slipping into warm water after being cold for so long. And every time we weren't, the guilt clawed at me. I'd hear Dave in the shower, humming to himself, not realizing the weight I carried. I'd fold laundry for my son and wonder what kind of mother forgets the line between good and gone. I stopped recognizing myself in the mirror. But I did recognize something else. Desire. Need. The dangerous kind of longing that doesn't knock anymore, it just opens the door and walks in like it belongs. I told myself it would stop. That I could control it. That as long as nothing physical happened again, I could still pretend to be good. But I knew. Deep down, the line had already been crossed, and nothing was ever going to be the same again. It didn't take long for the seams to start showing. At first, it was small things. Dave came home one evening and asked why Caleb had been over again. I lied, said he dropped something off for him from work, said it was quick. He nodded, didn't press. But the next day, our son. He was sitting at the kitchen table, crayons everywhere, drawing what looked like a truck. And he asked, "When's Uncle Caleb coming back?" My heart thudded so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. I smiled too quickly, said, "Oh, I don't know, sweetie. He's busy." But in that moment, I realized how much I had let him in. Into our home. Into our routines. Into the air of our lives. I started pulling back. Or trying to. I stopped answering Caleb's texts as quickly. Made excuses not to see him. Tried to breathe back into the shell of the life I'd built. But the shell had already cracked. Then one afternoon, I was cleaning out my purse, mind scattered, half distracted, and I didn't notice Dave standing behind me until I heard his voice. "What's this?" He was holding the receipt. For the book Caleb gave me. My name. The title. The date, my birthday. I froze. Couldn't lie fast enough. "It's just a book." Caleb picked it up for me. I paid him back. It was nothing. He didn't respond. Just stared at me. And that silence? It was worse than yelling. That night, dinner was quiet. The clinking of forks, the scrape of chairs. And then suddenly, "You spending a lot of time with him?" Dave asked. Not looking up. Just cutting his steak. I laughed too loud. Too fake. Tried to brush it off like it was absurd. But the air between us had shifted. It was heavy now. Thick with something neither of us wanted to name. Over the next few days, the tension grew. We started fighting about nothing. Groceries. The thermostat. The way I loaded the dishwasher. But it was never about those things. It was about the distance. The gut feeling he couldn't shake. And the guilt I couldn't hide. Meanwhile, Caleb. He noticed I was pulling away. One afternoon, we met at the park of all places. We sat in my car with the windows cracked, the smell of rain drifting in. He looked at me, eyes tired, voice low, and said, "We could be happy, Lila. Really happy. You know that, don't you?" I turned to the window. Watched a woman walk her dog, her life probably simple, untouched by the chaos of mine. "It's not that easy," I whispered. "Why not?" he said. "You love me. I know you do. I feel it every time I look at you." I didn't deny it, because I did. But love doesn't always come with clean lines and easy choices. I was trapped. 2 lives. One built on duty. A husband. A child. A house full of memories. A life that made sense on paper, that everyone else thought was beautiful. And the other. Built on desire. On being seen. On laughter that reached places in me that had been quiet for years. I started lying more than I ever thought I could. Small lies. Then bigger ones. And the worst part? I got good at it. I told myself it was temporary. That I was just figuring things out. That once I knew what I wanted, I'd do the right thing. But the truth was, I didn't want to choose. I wanted both. The safety and the fire. The history and the hunger. But life doesn't work like that. I could feel the walls closing in. The looks from Dave lasting a beat too long. The silence after a phone buzzed. The lingering questions in my son's voice. Everything was unraveling. I was losing control. And Caleb. He started to change too. He wanted more. Not just hidden kisses or cryptic texts. He wanted Sunday mornings. He wanted to hold my hand in public. He wanted a life. A real one. With me. He asked me if I loved Dave. And I didn't know how to answer. Because I did. And I didn't. I loved who he used to be. Who we used to be. But I was disappearing inside that version of us. And with Caleb, I felt alive. But also, terrified. Because what kind of woman risks her whole world for something that might not last? What kind of mother gambles her child's peace for her own longing? What kind of person becomes the thing she used to judge? I didn't recognize myself anymore. And that scared me most of all. It was a Wednesday. Late afternoon. The kind of golden light that spills across the counters like honey. I remember it because it felt warm, deceptively warm, like nothing could go wrong under that kind of light. Caleb had stopped by. Again. He said it was just to return a screwdriver he borrowed. But we both knew that wasn't why he came. We were in the kitchen. The place where everything started. The place where it always happened, the stolen glances, the late-night wine, the first electric silence. He leaned against the counter, grinning at something I'd just said. I don't even remember what it was. Something small, stupid, light. I was laughing. The kind of laugh that comes from somewhere deep. The kind that hadn't existed in my marriage for a long time. And then, he reached out, brushed a loose strand of hair behind my ear. It was tender. So familiar. Too familiar. And that's when I heard it. The door. Opening. Closing. Footsteps. I turned. And Dave was standing there. Briefcase still in hand. Tie loosened. Eyes locked on mine. He wasn't supposed to be home. He'd texted earlier, said he had meetings through dinner. But there he was. And he had seen it. The gesture. The touch. The closeness. All of it. He didn't speak right away. He just stared at me. Then at Caleb. Then back to me again. The air turned thick, like something sacred had been ripped open. And then, what the hell is going on? His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It carried years in it. Years of trust. Of shared beds, holidays, hospital visits, newborn cries, whispered apologies in the dark. All shattered in that one question. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. I couldn't speak. Couldn't lie. Couldn't hide. Caleb stepped forward. Foolish, brave, I don't know. He started to explain, to say something. But Dave raised his hand, just a small movement. Enough to silence him. And then, the worst sound. The soft padding of tiny feet against the tile. My son, still in his little school uniform. holding a toy car. "Mommy," he said, "why is Daddy mad?" And my heart cracked like porcelain. I knelt down quickly, hugged him so tight he squirmed. But when I looked up, it was Dave's face that undid me. Not anger, not rage, just heartbreak. Quiet, stunned heartbreak. He looked at me like I was someone he didn't know, someone he wouldn't have let near our child. And I wanted to scream, to go back, to undo it all. But you can't unsee something like that. You can't unknow it. Caleb stood frozen, out of place now, wrong, like a stain that wouldn't come out. I whispered, "You should go." He hesitated, tried to look at me one last time. I didn't meet his eyes. He left. The door closed behind him. Dave didn't speak. Not for hours. He walked past me, grabbed his coat, his keys, and left. I sat on the kitchen floor. Same kitchen, same table, same walls. But it felt like a crime scene now. A place where something had died. Trust, respect. The version of me I'd spent years building. Gone. And the worst part? It wasn't the yelling. It wasn't the confrontation. It was the silence that followed. The cold, echoing silence that filled the house. It stretched into the night, into the next morning, into days that felt like punishment. I had broken something. Not just my marriage, not just my family, but something inside my son, inside myself. And there's no undoing that. There's no taking back the look on his face when he saw me holding another man's gaze with too much softness. There's no unlearning the silence in Dave's eyes when he realized I had left him emotionally long before Caleb ever touched me. I had crossed the line, and now I was standing on the other side of a life I once called mine, watching it crumble, with no one to blame but myself. It's strange how a house can feel bigger after someone leaves. Not better. Just louder in the silence. The walls echo differently when there's no one to fill them. Dave moved out 2 months after that day. No yelling. No final fight. He packed quietly, methodically. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed, not out of defiance, just to hold myself together. He didn't look at me much. Didn't ask for explanations anymore. He didn't need them. He took his clothes, his books, the toolbox from the garage, the photo of us from our first trip to Oregon, the one I always thought he barely noticed. That's when I cried. Not when he walked out, but when I saw the empty nail in the wall where that photo used to hang. That nail said everything. That something once mattered. And now it didn't. We settled on joint custody. Every other weekend. Wednesday dinners. Our son adjusted the way children do. With quiet questions. And too much understanding for someone so small. He never mentioned Caleb. And I didn't either. Because whatever that was, it ended too. He tried to call. A few times. Left voicemails I couldn't bring myself to play. I didn't answer. Not because I didn't feel anything, but because I felt too much. And none of it made sense anymore. Desire, love, guilt, loneliness. They'd all melted together into this dull ache I carried around like a second skin. So I went quiet. I stopped wearing makeup. Not because I was punishing myself. I just didn't see the point anymore. There were no faces left to impress. No masks I needed to keep in place. I started therapy. I didn't go to fix myself. I didn't even know what fixed looked like anymore. I went because I couldn't carry the weight alone. And somewhere in the middle of those sessions, I started talking about the girl I used to be. The one who used to write. The one who'd stay up past midnight with wine and words and dreams that hadn't yet been traded in for school pickups and meal plans. So I bought a journal. Not a sleek one. A rough, lined one from a bookstore no one shops at anymore. I sat at the kitchen table, the same one where everything happened. Where I first met Caleb. Where I first lied. Where I first admitted, silently, to myself, that I wasn't happy. And I wrote. Pages and pages. Not for anyone else. Not for Instagram. Not for therapy. just for me. I wrote about how I used to feel invisible, not because of Dave, not entirely, but because I stopped seeing myself. I became a role: wife, mother, homemaker, and somewhere in between the grocery lists and laundry, I forgot how to feel like a woman. Caleb didn't fix that. He just held a mirror up to it. He showed me what was missing, but he wasn't the answer. I see that now. He wasn't the ending. He was the breaking point, the catalyst. And Dave wasn't the villain. He was just tired, just like I was. We both gave up in our own quiet ways. Mine just echoed louder. Now, some mornings I sit at this table, sip my tea, and stare at nothing. Not out of emptiness, but peace. Real peace. I feel the silence. Let it wrap around me. Let it whisper things I'd once tried to bury beneath routine. There's no more pretending, no more performing. Just me, flawed, alone, but real. I don't know what comes next. Maybe something, maybe nothing, but for the first time in a long time, I'm not afraid of the quiet. I've made peace with the echo, because in that echo, I finally found my voice. It had been a year, 365 days since everything fell apart, or maybe fell into place. I was different. Not dramatically. Not the kind of different you notice in photos or small talk. But deep down, in the places no one sees, I'd changed. The kind of change that doesn't come from age or time, but from surviving the unraveling of who you thought you were. It was a Saturday. Late afternoon. Drizzly. The kind of rain that clung to windows and made everything feel a little softer, quieter. I ducked into the small used bookstore near the corner of 6th and Bell. The place still smelled like old paper and spilled coffee, the way it always had. I didn't go there often anymore, but something pulled me in that day. Maybe nostalgia. Maybe loneliness. Maybe just habit. I was flipping through the poetry section, not looking for anything, just letting the titles speak. And then, I felt it, that electric stillness. Like time held its breath for just a second. I looked up, and there he was, Caleb, standing at the end of the aisle. He hadn't seen me yet. He was laughing softly, head tilted, speaking to a woman beside him. She was petite, with long dark hair and a scarf wrapped 3 times around her neck. She looked up at him like he held the sun. And maybe, for her, he did. That's when he turned. Our eyes met. And for one long, silent second, the world stilled. No music, no thunder, no flickering candles. Just 2 people frozen in the middle of 1,000 unspoken words. He looked older, wiser. There was a weight in his eyes, not sadness, just life. And I knew I probably looked the same. We didn't smile, didn't wave. Just a nod, barely perceptible. Like a shared memory whispered between 2 hearts that once set fire to each other. He turned back to her. And I turned back to the shelf. My hand landed on a book without thinking. A slim, dusty volume I hadn't read in years. Pablo Neruda. Love's Sonnet 17. I smiled. Not because of what was, but because of what I'd survived. There was no pain. No longing. Just a strange, quiet warmth. A kind of peace I never thought I'd feel again. Some stories don't end with a kiss. Some don't end at all. They just fade into memory, soft edges, blurred pages. A quiet understanding. And a promise to never forget. Have you ever loved someone you weren't supposed to? Not the fairy tale kind. The kind that shows up quietly in the spaces where your soul has been starving. The kind that feels like a lifeline and a betrayal. All at once. That's what Caleb was to me. A mirror. A match. A mistake. And also, the most alive I'd felt in years. People talk about consequences like they're easy to count. Like hurt fits neatly into columns. Love in one. Guilt in another. But it doesn't work like that. You can crave something. And hate yourself for it. You can break someone's heart. While still holding love in your hands. And sometimes, the worst thing you do is the only thing that ever made you feel real. Would you risk it all for a chance at happiness, even if it meant losing everything else? I did. And I lost. And I found. And maybe both needed to happen. So tell me, what would you have done? Comment below. I want to hear your story. No judgment, just truth. And if this stirred something in you, subscribe. There are more stories waiting. Ones we don't say out loud, but feel deeply. Next time on Cheating Confession Diary.